And again, this might be the way I made the masks too. Where I'm like an intermediate sewer. I've done a ton of quilting and not a ton of garment sewing. But last time I had questions about using 1/4 inch rather and 1/2 inch elastic braid, and he was like, definitely use 1/4 inch. He thought that 1/2 inch might chafe your ears. So last week, someone suggested cutting the 1/2 inch in half and running a zigzag stitch. So I'm going to send him a prototype of that. He also said that, so this is the thing. He's got friends who are in the clinic in New York Presbyterian, and he like does research for them. So he hasn't been redeployed yet, but he'll give me more feedback. But his thing about the bars, I did the bar and the casing. He thought that might, like, healthcare workers may want to wear like a bandage or something on their nose because it might chafe it otherwise. So I'm going to try it with pipe cleaners or maybe some sort of thinner gauge wire. But that's just what he said.
Laura, were you saying that the bar was exposed in a pattern you were doing?
No, I did the amended pattern for Yale New Haven. So here, if you can see it, this is the little casing I made. And I started making them larger than the pattern calls for. The pattern calls for 2x6. And I think I shared with you, Kate, that some bits of the metal were sticking out. So I was clipping this down to 5.5, the bars, and then filing it so it didn't like catch your hand while you pull it out, because it's not really good. So I'm making the casing 6.5 by 2.5 now. I'm also, I think for me to get a pipe cleaner in a casing, it's gonna have to be a little bigger, so I might go up to 3. So anyway, his thing was like, again, he's sort of, he's like affiliated with the hospital, not actually doing frontline work at this point. But I'm gonna make him some of the hospital pocket pattern, which he said looked great. And he likes the pattern. You know, the top stitching is kind of a chore, but I think this will help it withstand multiple washings. But I might make him some without the bar. I'll continue to make the ones with the bar for Yale New Haven, but
Laura, can you hold it up?
Yeah, sorry.
There we go. Can I ask you, sorry to interject, but are you using 16-inch long elastic?
I am actually cutting it more to 18 to 20 inch.
Okay.
For this, but yeah, I'm making one long loop.
Yeah.
When I asked him, he was like, just send us whatever you have, like fabric, ear loops, just whatever you can do. One thing he said too is he said he has a giant face, which he's over 6 feet tall, I agree. So he thought the Yale New Haven man pocket pattern was a little small on him. So I recommended to give it to small-faced colleagues, but I'm gonna actually, I talked to him and he thought if I just took the pattern, which is buried under, there's just so much fabric right here, I can't find the pattern. But anyway, he thought if I just give it another 1/2 inch around the pattern, that would do for like large male face or large faces. So anyway, I have a copy machine. I still can go into work because I work at an essential business, and I'm just gonna blow it up a little bit. So.
Okay. Laura, if I can ask if you can put in those notes into the chat, like I think you said 18 to 20 inches of elastic is what you're finding.
Yeah.
And also if you get that actual, the slightly larger version, if you can send that to me, we can continue. We'll talk about the Yale pattern for a little bit. And I just want to, I just think that it would be helpful for, so MakeHaven is hoping to start laser cutting into that pattern. And so we want to try to get the best pattern that we can get, or the best sort of, what's working the best before we start our cutting to try to make some kits.
Awesome, that's great.
May I reply to her?
Please.
Okay, so first I sent a pattern to my dad, who's a large guy and has a beard. He's gonna give me feedback, and that would probably be the largest. Second, we've been putting the nose wire pocket on the outside because of rubbing. Doesn't matter what it looks like, it's how it works. And we've made the pocket so the wire is removable, so you need to make it slightly shorter than the wire that's being used. They pay havoc on the laundry service, so you take the wire out, throw the mask in, put the wire back in. For regular folk, we've been making short little pockets because they can use a bread twist tie and they have it handy, and that's enough for average people to use. But for everyone else, we've been using a longer wire, like for Yale, New Haven, and put the pocket on the outside, and it seems to be working fine.
That's great. I'm glad you shared that because I considered that. So I'll try that. I'm going to send him like 5 or 6 more prototypes next week and get some feedback. Question about the bread tie. When you make a casing for a bread tie, what size are you making the casing when you start out?
I think I cut it at 6 inches and then tucked in the ends to about a 1/4 inch, so it comes out about 5 inches. But the crucial thing is it's just ever so slightly shorter than the bread tie.
Yeah.
And for my friends just going to the store, that's good enough because I can't provide them the wire. I don't have enough. But in terms of cutting the elastic in half, I would not recommend that. So I should start with, I used to be a professional costumer, and now I've worked for many years with the Hamden High School kids, so I know laundry. It's not going to hold up to the repeated laundering because you're cutting into the elastic and it will eventually fray. So use it as is or improvise to something else. For the ear loops, we've used 1/8 inch elastic, and that's worked out fine. It's actually a bit more comfortable. But the 1/4 inch for the head elastic, because the 1/8 is a little bit fragile for that sort of aspect. But we've been running out of elastic altogether, and the bias tape we've been saving for like the 2-piece Yale type mask because it needs to curve. But you can use straight on fabric in a tube for the ties. You do not need to use bias tape. It doesn't need to be flexible. The other thing that other people have tried and they've laundered is a very long all cotton shoelace, like for hikers, and they say that works great.
Great. Question about the bias tape. Since I'm trying to just use up some stuff in my like what I have, it's got that sort of interesting fold thing. Do
Yes.
I need to sew it down, or should I because it's about a 1/2 inch, and I could fold it over and fold it into a 1/4 inch, or I could just like knot it at the ends and not care about it. Do you have any recommendations for that?
Yes, so the bias tape has raw edges, as you can see. It's designed to be sewn down. So they have what's called single fold, which is a sort of just, you see the raw edges tucked under, and then double fold where you see that the raw edges are all the way in. You can, I use the single fold for the nose wire pockets because you want a nice flat pocket for it. But if you use it for a tie, which is what I did on this one, you have to sew it down because the minute it goes in the laundry, those raw edges will start fraying and knotting and disintegrating. So
thank you.
So what I do, you can use single or double for the ties. It doesn't matter. I save the single for the nose pockets because it does. Yeah. And what I do is I just take the whole bias tape spool and just run it through, make one long tie out of it. And one end is going to be tucked in here so you don't need to back stitch it. And the other, it's so much faster just to, let me do this, just to knot the end.
Yeah.
So once you have them sewn together and pre-cut, you just knot the ends afterwards. It goes much faster. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Sorry, can I ask a question for the lady who was just talking?
That's Meg.
Hi, Anna here. Can you show me if the copy of the one where you had created an outside pocket for the nose piece?
I've got 2 sitting right here, but one version is using the pattern that originally ties to Yale, New Haven. And by the way, shout out to MakeHaven for modifying that. It's simple. It made it a lot simpler to try to dig through the pattern. And so I made the first one, my prototype, with the nose pocket out of bias tape on the inside, with the piece of wire that pulls out. This just like electrical wire in this case. But for these ones, I just made the pocket on the outside. You just find the center of it, of the mask, and just stick it on. Make it a little bit shorter than.
You can hold it up a little higher. If you're holding it, there we go. There we go. Okay.
There we go. Yes.
So it's just sewn, top stitched onto the top. You start here, you sew over, you sew up, and you sew over. So one end is open.
That's
Works
perfect.
great.
Yeah.
And then this one, I tried it on the inside, but after walking around the house with it a while, we've decided that we should, for like the Yale type, we're going to put the pocket on the outside. This is too irritating.
Yeah, that looks.
Meg, I have questions.
Yeah.
I don't know if the other lady who was speaking had more questions about that, but I have. So I'm actually trying to make a video to help with the Yale New Haven pattern.
Good.
But I guess I am confused about the wire, because in the second pocket pattern, it doesn't have any instructions on how to insert the wire. So what I figured out was that I was going to top stitch it in.
Yeah, so this woman who's doing this, she's great, but if you've been looking at her pattern and her instructions for the last couple of weeks, it is evolving over time. So you have to keep going back. The nose wire was first deemed not necessary because she was using it in a country that it's very common to wear a cloth mask, like for allergies and whatever, or SARS. And so the nose wire wasn't required, and it was extra work and not as comfortable. But it appeared later because now we really need that firm fit.
Yeah.
So I had sewing this into the seam allowance, and I wouldn't recommend it because Yale's going to have to throw these into commercial washing machines, and the wire is going to poke through, it's going to rust, and it will maybe interfere with totally disinfecting around it in the laundry. So that's why I made this to be removable.
Oh yeah, because I thought that was a problem, but there wasn't really any clear instruction about it. So I was like,
Yes.
Okay, I guess that's what they want. You
Right,
know?
so I think in yours, that definitely do that. And as you see, like this version, I made the wire quite a bit longer than a bread tie because it does fit better. And for Yale, that would be, for any healthcare worker, that would be the choice. Go for the safest. I've been sending the masks to Yale without any wire, my assumption being that somewhere in the Yale University they can find the wire. The mask is what they needed right away. So I just make the pockets and send it along without the wire. If they haven't the wire, that's another issue, and we've experimented with all kinds of wires. We found like 3 or 4 that work just fine.
I just want to jump in about the wires and just let you know that we just are starting to work with, I think it's Ulbrich Steel, and they're in North Haven and Wallingford. They are actually making the wire pieces for N95 masks, and they reached out and said they're going to be able to donate some of those wire strips to MakeHaven. So we're working on getting that really quickly. As you may know, MakeHaven had been cutting. Do I have any handy? Of course not. They're downstairs. But MakeHaven had been cutting these little metal strips in our metal shop, and we're working on cutting some more of those. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Laura's got one there. So we had been cutting. We're hoping to cut some more, and we're also hoping to get some from the steel company that will be going out and distributed in our boxes. So I will be updating as that happens, but hopefully that's going to come together.
So you'll give us the dimensions of that wire?
Yeah, so it was interesting when Laura brought back her feedback to make the wires, I think, a little bit shorter. I did pass that along to MakeHaven for the ones that we're cutting. But then I think the ones, I haven't talked to them directly. I've just talked to their rep. I'm letting JR and Lior get the dimensions and the final pieces. I suspect that whatever they put in the surgical masks and other masks naturally is the size and things that they'll be cutting to, and then those will become available, and I'll put them out for anyone who needs them.
And I can say why I made them this size. Basically, the casing's pretty easy to fiddle this out of. I was worried about the metal kind of rubbing against the nose, so you can still kind of get it out of the casing, even though it's a little shorter, but that way it doesn't sort of risk sort of poking somebody. So that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, I put it on the outside. Who cares what it looks like? They have to wear it for hours. Let's make them comfortable.
Yeah.
Meg, I was wondering if you have a copy of the earlier pattern that explains how to add in that channel, and if you don't have a copy, maybe we could talk, like message, and you could try to explain it a little more.
Yeah. I have a pile of patterns right now, so I'll look back through that. I'm glad to see that there'll be like a video made step by step using all the things that people have learned from doing this.
Thank you. Yeah.
One of the things we did, we got our donation of material and linen tape from the Yale Art Gallery. And the tape is soft, so we got rid of the channel entirely, and we just sewing it on each corner instead. And one of the feedbacks I wanted from users is, if you make a loop, it sorts of gathers around the side of the face. If you keep them 4 separate ones, it stays flat to the face. And I don't know fit-wise which Yale prefers, but I do know sewing them one on each corner uses less tape, which is why we did it.
Megan, about the pattern, I found the casing channel pattern, whatever, at the end of the pocket pattern that was up maybe like 3 or 4 days ago on the MakeHaven site. It's weird because they have the pattern, then they have a second pattern for pockets, and then there's like, oh, cut this 2x6" thing, and then that's where it tells you to put it in the lining, which you just flip it around, it sounds like, and stick it on the outside. But that's I can probably find it and send it to you if you're interested. But it was also a little tricky because it comes at the end of the pattern after you've already sewn the whole thing together. So
yeah, so my bad. First of all, great for putting it where you need to sew it. And the other is my mistake when I was making the yellow ones. I keep thinking pocket for the loop of the ties, but that's not what they mean by pocket. They mean pocket as in you can get through the middle. So I'm making them so you can put the mask through the middle per their instructions, but I wasn't making a loop at the ears. I was sewing 4 individual ties on the ends, and it seemed to give a smoother fit on the sides, but I would love to hear from the healthcare workers what they prefer. I'll sew whatever works for them.
I don't think we have any healthcare workers on the call today, unfortunately. I know we have in the past. If you're here and I don't know about it, please keep up. But to go back to the various pattern confusion, right now on our website, we do have the MakeHaven modified pattern, which has the nose sleeve, which I think, as Laura mentioned, originally appeared at the bottom of the pattern. We did move it back up on our modified version that's on the website right now. I'll put a link to that in the chat, and that does have the sleeve happening on page 9, which is about when you'd want to put it. It does have it on the inside because that's what the pattern has, but as you're hearing here, you can put it on the outside as well. One question I did have for our more experienced sewers is if some people have if they've already done the mask without the nose, the sleeve for the nose bridge, is that something that can be added on at the end, do you think? I know one person had done that and was saying they didn't think so, and I just didn't know enough to say for sure. But the question is, if Yale won't take them, should we just pass those along to other people, or is that something that can be added at the end if you have completed the mask without that?
If I may, on these ones where there's no pocket on the side, you top stitch through all the layers after the fact, works fine. But because they need to have the pocket inside, you really do need to sew it first, because otherwise you're grabbing the surface inside that they need for their mask. So no, I spaced on some and I had to just unpick this one stitch line to put it in. You do need to put it on first.
Yeah,
thanks, that's what I suspected.
I would, I made one and then I got to the end of the pattern. And so for that one, just because that's for my cousin and he can just use it in his personal life, not where he works, I did just run a line. And as Meg pointed out, that's not ideal because now the pocket is shorter right here. However, I mean, if you really love annoying sewing by hand, you could probably, whip stitch or something crazy like that.
I know it's funny because it seems obvious, but is there any chance, if anybody is doing it right now, to send a picture? Or maybe, sorry, I haven't checked the MakeHaven website, Kate. Is there a picture of just what it looks like putting that on? Yeah, There we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hold it up a little higher?
Sorry.
So you've done the first step. That's the front.
This is the
front of
lining.
mask.
So yeah, I'll be doing this differently. I'll put this on these guys, which is the exterior fabric. But yeah, so what I did is I made, as we were talking about, you cut, this is 2x6, and then you just, 1/4-inch seam, fold it down,
2x6.
cut it in half, and then ideally then you run a stitch along this guy.
Ah, there we go. Okay.
And then it's not fun. And, for people who love sewing machine talk, I increased the stitch length to like, normally it's at 2.5 and I made it like 3.5. So I didn't like break all my needles, but you can get it to happen. So here's one of these guys. Again, this is the wrong side, but whatever.
Okay. It's so good for my brain to just see it.
Right?
Yeah.
Wait, that's actually pretty easy, right?
Can you project a moment?
Yeah, it's
You just put it on the outside. I've been thinking about this for days because it like wasn't in the pattern. Actually, I think I have to redo the video now. So
if I may, you have a technical issue. Some of the sewing you're having trouble with, I think, is not you, it's the fabric. So
Right.
the reason you use bias tape, which is fabric cut diagonally, is it's much stretchier. And you are trying to sew a straight fabric on a curve. So on this one, it's straight across, and you can use straight grain fabric. On the tie, you can use straight grain fabric. But you're trying to make straight fabric go around a curve, and it's not cooperating. So if you don't buy bias tape or get it donated to you, you're going to have to make that strip on the bias, which means all of the fibers, instead of going this way and this way, they're going on a diagonal. It will make sewing that so much easier because the fabric will stretch around the curve for you, especially if you press it that way. Much easier to sew it.
So
Does that help?
Oh.
To clarify, instead of, you don't have to, like Laura's example, you can make a sort of faux bias, right? You don't actually have to make the bias. You can just cut it on the angle, cut it on the bias. Is that right?
You can easily make your own bias. Instead of taking the rectangle, and cutting it like parallel or perpendicular to the edge of the fabric as it's woven, you just simply put it at a 45-degree angle, and you can make your own bias tape.
Thanks, Meg. That's really helpful.
We could make a video of that if you want, but there's a lot online that can do it. There's also, if you have it, and MakeHaven might have it, there's something called a bias tape maker, which once you've cut the strips out yourself, it's this like little metal tube, and you just feed the fabric in as you're ironing it, and it automatically rolls it to the fold exactly where you want it. I would suggest that will drive you crazy, and just try, if you can, to use store-bought bias tape for as long as you can. It's way faster.
I think that Charlotte is on the call, and Charlotte had sent us along at one time a little, I don't remember if it was a video or a blog post about how to do that ironing with a couple of pins. Charlotte, if you're around, you happen to have it, put it in the comments.
I'll put the link in the chat.
Thank you.
They're closed right now, but I am a volunteer at EcoWorks in North Haven, and we keep rating their bias tape. I know there's one of the managers at the Hamden, Joanne's. Her mom works at Yale, New Haven. She's very committed to helping. So that's another source for store-bought bias tape, which I said, you can make your own bias tape, but they need mass fast. So if you can use commercial bias tape, much faster to do. Save yourself the trouble if you can.
Thanks, Meg. Yeah, that's a really good point, and I'm going to see if we can get some bias tape. I did put out a call, see if we can get some bias tape to the boxes I just want to pause us for 1 second because we did have some questions, and I know we have some people who are sort of new to this process, and I just wanted to go over sort of the basics for people who may not know. So I'm actually going to present just for a second. Boop, boop, boop. All right, so as soon as it's okay, I'm presenting my whole screen with way too many tabs and everything. But I just want to show all of you, if you go to makehaven.org/face-masks, that's sort of your landing page where we're putting all of our information. And so you can see, for example, this is a link. So as we have these sewing circles at the top, we'll have links to that. Right here is where you can sign up, and there's just a form there. If you haven't done that, I think most people on the call have, but signing up there, that'll make sure that you get emails about updates, things that are happening in the boxes, these calls. This is some compiled info that we did early on of research on different materials and things like that. Right here is a video that Lior made of a very simple rectangular mask. This is for personal use or for the soup kitchens, things like that. This does just show one layer of material. I've been doing it with 2 layers, but I think it depends on the thickness of your material. You want to make sure that it is breathable. Here is the modified Yale New Haven hospital pattern that we've been talking about. We also put up the video that they made. It's Craft Passion that Yale New Haven is using. This is a video that they made. I found it a little confusing still, and so when Megan finishes her video, that will go onto this page as well. This is another version that that it sounds like Yale New Haven can offer.
Article in the Epic Times.
What was that? Hold on.
Nothing. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay. So whoops. There's that mask pattern. Let's go back. Too many tabs. Okay, back. So here, this is the another version. This is a rectangular and more simple pattern that from my talks with Lisa at Yale New Haven, it sounds like they will be able to take, especially if you can change out the ties for elastic. So this is another version. Some people have called it the tissue box pattern, where it's the rectangle mask where the surgical mask is inserted into sort of a middle flap versus slid into the side. You can see that it does meet their requirements. So they're looking for a metal nose bridge, the correct type of material, not too tight and close to mouth, a pocket for the filtration material, and elastic for elastic for ears. They said ties are okay. So all of that information is up there. The no-sew mask, this is just something we added for people now as they're requesting that everyone wear masks when they go out. This is just for people who don't sew in their personal use. We're going to add one more here. Down here is our drop porch locations. And so these locations are where you can drop completed masks, no contact drops. They're just covered porches with boxes on them. Each has 2 boxes, one for materials and one for completed masks. So those can all go into these different locations. I know several of you are using them. As I mentioned, we are trying to get some kits together as well for people who have no materials, but then we'll also have elastic or nose pieces individually, in little Ziploc bags of 10 or so in these locations. So that's the main information that you probably want to know. I will stop presenting now. There we go. So yeah, so that's just sort of your main go-to information for anyone who is new. I do have other questions that were sent ahead of time, but if anyone wants to pop in with their questions, go ahead.
Sorry, Kate. Oops. Sending you a message.
I have a quick question. So I did buy some 1/2-inch elastic. Heard you about not wanting to cut it down because it'll fray. Would you fold it in half and sew it? I like making, this style where you've got the one loop around the head. Any suggestions on how to get 1/2-inch elastic to cooperate? Or
you could probably use it as is around the head. The narrower elastic is for the ear loops. Anything wider than 1/4 of an inch is just going to rub way too much and not fit right. But I bet for head elastic, yeah, you can use the thicker stuff.
Okay, cool.
Sorry to clarify, head elastic ideal would be
So 1/4 maybe.
1/8 or 1/4 inch would be ideal, but it's getting hard to find.
I'm going to get some in like a week from Walmart's third-party seller, in addition to MakeHaven's great drop-offs.
And I am hoping to get some more. I just spoke with the wonderful Sally at Eli Whitney. They still have a little bit. What they have is the 8-inch cord elastic. As a new sewer, this has been an interesting experiment and learning curve for me. But I basically, because it rolls and it moves. But I did put together a pattern, which I'll add up to the face mask page, which is a very simple pattern. That just basically has you hand stitch the cord in place first to keep it from rolling away when you put it into your machine. And I found that to be helpful. So I'm gonna get more of these, a little bit more of this. And she said she does also have some 1/2-inch elastic. I don't know how much, but I'm gonna pick that up from her later today and I will be distributing that. So it sounds, I appreciate the note about the 1/2-inch elastic. Maybe we'll recommend that that be used for the full, the behind the head, not for the ears. And I'm curious, what is there any modifications in the pattern if we're using 1/2-inch?
Well,
Go ahead, Megan.
but yeah, I think one problem that I heard about is that if the mask is too long, they're not accepting it. And if you make it a 1/2 inch, you're gonna have to make the mask longer in order to accommodate that extra like 1/2 inch to the mask. So that's just one concern there. Yeah.
Do you know how long is too long? Because I remember last Saturday was helpful when you folks were saying that these wings, right? I'm calling them the wings where you put the casing in, that it was really tight. So I added a 1/2 inch on each side.
Yeah, so that was my information too. And then we got like an email where people said that Yale wasn't accepting them if the wings were too long. So then in my video, I'm trying to only add on like 1/4 of an inch to each wing, but that's all kind of like rumors also.
Yeah, I mean,
Too long is subjective. Too long is subjective. What's too long? We really, really need dimensions from them. And what I would love on the MakeHaven site, if someone there can measure these masks and maybe make a 3D scan. We're also making N95 covers for the New Haven EMTs, but I've never seen the N95, so we're guessing. Yeah, if Yale says this is too long, define too long. We'll give you what you want, but what's too long?
Yeah, I'm a little frustrated.
We've run into there is that I don't think Peter is on this call. I think Peter's the one who gave us this feedback, which came sort of through his sewing groups, his personal sewing circle. And I did bring it back to our main contacts there. And they said that they didn't know about that, that basically that's not a concern that they had. But again, you know, if you're bringing them to Yale, you're dropping them off at West Haven, so there is some sort of disconnect a little bit. And the you know, as Lisa from Yale pointed out, you know, they're looking for feedback from sewers, but you know, they're not sewers, so they kind of went with this pattern. That's why they have those 5 things that are important. But again, yeah, it's confusing to have it be not too long because every face is different. I found that even using the patterns, I have a more narrow face and they tend to be too wide for me. But I think trying to split the difference may be our best bet right now.
Thank you, that was helpful. For the N95 covers, so this cousin of mine in New York who's giving feedback, he said, yeah, the pocket, this thing is too small for an N95 cover. So I'd be interested in trying to make some. Is that pattern going to be available? And then I'm going to just send him stuff to try out with his N95 mask. So I don't know if I could.
So we made the N95 mask because the friend is an ambulance driver in downtown New Haven.
Yeah.
And we gave him 14 and said, try them on your shift. And he reports back that the standard N95 size that most of the guys are wearing, and they're mostly guys on the night crew for whatever reason, fits fine. But there's one petite woman, she's wearing an N95 of a different size, and we haven't gotten feedback on the fit, which obviously would be too big on her. So if someone from MakeHaven could maybe, or someone track down N95 mask and the standard surgical mask, measure them, do a scan, then I can make a pattern, I can draft a pattern, but only if I know the dimensions required. So we keep asking our nurse friends and our EMT friends, did it fit? Did it fit? And they're saying yes, but that's not really helpful. We want to get a good fit. Like, what's good enough? So I reached out to the East Shore Public Health Department here, and we worked out with the nurse. We now have a contact. Her name, let me get it for you, is Madison Wurzel. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly. So I explained to her that there's a disconnect between what healthcare workers need and what we can provide, because they have all the N95s, all the surgical masks. We don't. We can't. And so what's the right size? I'd love to have a contact at Yale who is a sewer and maybe a nurse or whatever, a person in the hospital, to be that contact with us. Can we ask you this question? Will you get us the answer? No one wants to give them what they don't want, right?
And that's a really good point. We have some, we've been working directly with Yale New Haven Hospital on a lot of projects. We have an intubation chamber. We have all sorts of things that MakeHaven is doing. So I think we do have those contacts. Can you confirm what we need is like from the measurements we would need? It'd be like from the top to the chin and then side to side. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, precisely. And also, as someone else had pointed out, kind of the average dimensions around the head so that the elastic or ties are just the right size and not too much more. The other thing I'm working with Madison about, and maybe Yale can help, is I'm quite concerned about the comments on that, the lady who's doing the pattern that Yale is linking to. If you look in the comments people are using crazy things for the inside filter since they don't have these surgical masks. And it is alarming to me. I've worked in manufacturing for years as a technical writer, and it's like you can't just hold up random filter fabrics or items to your face and breathe through them. That's dangerous. So Madison, I tasked her with, please help us define what has been tested as safe to breathe through. For all our friends out there, the medical community should be absolutely using a regular surgical mask or N95, and they alone. But that leaves all the rest of us. What do you use that's safe? So I would love if Madison, I'll maybe send that information to you at MakeHaven and get you connected, because she can get us public health information, and you can provide being able to get the information out. So maybe we can work together on that. Filters is an issue that I'm concerned about.
Kate, do you recall I sent you that video that was from I watched a video where a hospital staff, 2 nurses from a hospital, I can't recall where from, but she mentioned they were studying filters, and they were talking about vacuum filters and HEPA filters. And I mean, I don't know how many people have that available to them, but they had done some research and they continue to do some research. I'll try and find that video. I don't know if it's helpful.
Yeah, and if you can find that and put that in the chat, that would be great. There's other information that I was trying to locate. I'm going to text Leor and see if he happens to have it, where I was seeing where there were some nice charts about different filtration materials and their effectiveness, but also their breathability. For example, the vacuum filter is one thing that we hear a lot about, and it does block a lot, but it's also not very breathable. And so that's another problem. But that's a good point about being safe with the pockets, and I think for most people just a standard the non pocket for for most people, just a more basic mask is usually a helpful and safer way to go. I want to just quickly go through some of the questions we got before. Well, let's talk about elastic, because we're always talking about elastic. So I talked a little bit about what is coming, and I know we've talked a little bit in the past about elastic hacks. One thing that I was doing is I got these rubber bands from Eli Whitney, and I was basically making scrunchies to go around them, so these can go around the head and be used that way. But I think you really kind of do need to make a little scrunchy tube to go around them, otherwise they'll totally get caught in the hair, plus they won't last as long. Another thing I'll see if I can get If I can share it in a second, I will. But I'm just curious what kind of things people are doing for elastics. If anyone has sources for that, someone mentioned Walmart or anything that might be coming through. Please jump in now. Let's talk about elastic for a minute.
I went to the dollar store and I bought a bunch of these elastic headbands. I don't know how big they are, but there's not very many left in the Universal Drive dollar store, thanks to me. But these seem to be about the same size, and you can cut them into ear loops.
Yeah, I had an idea about elastic, but I don't have any access to elastic, so I haven't tried it yet. But my understanding is that elastic is preferable to ties because it's easier to take on and take off. So would it save elastic if, for example, most of the ear tie or most of the head tie were fabric, but the ends or some portion of it was elastic? So it still had some stretch, but it wasn't like the same range of motion as all elastic, because that doesn't seem completely necessary if the only functionality you need is for it to go over and around your head. Has anyone tried anything like that, or does that seem like a good idea?
I suspect it's going to take a lot of labor, and time is also an issue that we're dealing with here. You're right about covering the elastic that's going around your hair. I've got fine hair, and that would be just a disaster. And also, for what it's worth, I've learned from nursing friends that ear elastic is great for up to like 3 or 4 hours. It's easy, or 2 or 3 hours. It's easy to take on and off, and it uses a lot like elastic. So yay! But for the people at Yale, New Haven, who are working an entire shift, it's been rubbing their ears something fierce. So they are better off with a tie or a head elastic for longer shifts. So who's using it when is part of how we decide whether it's going to be ear loops or head elastic, if that helps.
Yeah, I think we've heard mixed feedback about the elastic side, and I think that Yale has said that they prefer the ear elastic, but I think that they'll definitely take the ties, and I think that's a very good point. I think it depends on your job, and if you're keeping one mask on versus the elastic benefit for the healthcare workers is when they're having to take it on and off repeatedly. And so, yeah, I think that whichever you're able to make is helpful for Yale or for others. I want to share one other little hack real quick from, let's see if I can make this screen sharing thing happen again. So this is a picture a friend sent me, and this is basically, using, this is actually pantyhose or nylon. I had tried doing this, and I found that when you basically take some nylons and cut them to make the ear loops, it stretches too quickly, and so it lost its elasticity. This is what she's doing. She works with Downtown Evening Soup Kitchen, and so she found that when you do this for the elastic and then they put a safety pin, I'm sure there could be other things, that it still has enough stretch, but the safety pin holds it along in the back. So that's just one thing to show you that she's doing.
It's a little hard to hear you. I think someone is having feedback. I think Paul's microphone is on.
Oh, yeah. Wherever it was coming from just got muted, so I think we're good. Does anyone have anything more to add on elastic before I go to some other questions? All right. So we had a question, can't figure out what the best pattern as far as ease to make in bulk, but also safe in use. So outside of the Yale New Haven pattern, there is the video that I mentioned before that's on the MakeHaven website, and I'm also going to add a project that I added that I call the 10-minute mask. Is that me as very little sewing experience can now make in 10 minutes. So I find that pattern has been pretty good. So both of those will be on the other site. And I love all the talk about the Yale New Haven mask. It's important. Our healthcare workers are so crucial to us. But do keep in mind we have requests for 500 plus still to be filled. Individuals for people who are not in the hospital but in need of more standard masks. So know that if you are making those masks, those are definitely still a need, and we definitely need a lot of them. How to prevent gaps on the side of the face. Best materials. Use of a furnace filter as insulation and mass or mass material. So we talked a little bit about filters. I haven't heard anything about furnace filters. It makes me nervous, to be honest, personally. But if anyone has more information.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Let's wait for the public health nurse to reply back. I would not at this time recommend furnace filters. A coffee filter is at least food safe, but please let's not experiment and give yourself asbestosis or whatever on top of this because you're desperate for a filter. I will try to get that answer back to you as fast as I can.
Excellent, thanks. Let's see. We talked a little bit about this, but does anyone have anything more to say on the gaps from the sides of the face and how to prevent that? Perhaps not. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Yep. I think that's all the main questions. There's probably some questions in the chat, so feel free to jump in as I go through those. Oh, t-shirt material. Has anyone used t-shirt material? Anyone want to jump in on that? I've done that. I've been using t-shirt material to make the scrunchy part because t-shirt material is nice and stretchy for this. And I've also seen for an individual use, we have a pattern up now to cut a t-shirt for basic use. It's not the highest filtration, but that's just what I've heard. So what else do people know about t-shirt material?
If you're not accustomed to sewing with knits, sewing t-shirt material is not going to be easy for you. So it's probably not recommended unless you are already experienced. However, I have seen people who don't have bias tape or elastic cut strips of t-shirt material, which will not ravel typically, and use those as quick and easy ways to make ties. So there you go.
I would totally agree with you. The other thing that people are testing using the knit fabric for the mask itself, but in general, the way that textiles are constructed, this firmly woven cotton like you use for quilting, I think is much safer. Knit is comfortable because it stretches and it makes little air holes between the loops. So when I make one, I would use it for the ties. That's a great idea, but I do not think I'd use it for the filter part over the face. I think woven, smoothly woven fabric is much safer. And if you've run out, old cotton pillowcase and sheets are perfect.
I was just going through the chat, but feel free to jump in. See if I can find any other questions that didn't get asked. Oh, there was a question about is there recommendations on how to prepare things to drop off? That is on our face mask page. We are asking people to wash them if they can, wash them and bag them. Most people are leaving them in Ziploc bags, although other bags are fine because they are dropping off at covered porches. If you're able to wash them, that's great. People just are labeling them as washed. If you aren't, we can also wash them. It just causes a little extra time in the delivery, but you can just label them that way. Are there other questions about delivery of finished masks?
Nope.
All right, go ahead. And it sounded like you may have had another question.
Sorry. Is there like a specific count that's helpful to kind of minimize the amount of touching that happens when preparing for distribution? Like 10 per bag, 20 per bag?
That's a really good question. Probably not that we've necessarily figured out. I think that most of the time I'm getting around 10 at a time. But I think a lot of it depends on like people's availability for sewing. So it's like, I can sew for these 2 days and then whenever I get done, I'll drop off and then I may be working and not sewing. So if you have whatever feels like a batch to you, like I said, as we go around and collect them, I'm usually picking up between 20 and 40 at a time and delivering them directly to United Way and Yale Hospital.
I've been a part of those deliveries too, so thank you for that work. So to the shelters and food pantries. Thank you.
Are there any other questions that we have?
No, but if I could just make a statement. This is Liz. Can you hear me? Hi. I'm a professional costume designer that's been laid off, like a lot of us. And I would say about the pedestrian, what I'm calling the pedestrian mask, the original CDC pattern, the rectangular with the 3 pleats and the ear elastics is fine. Also, when you're doing ear elastics, you're using a lot less elastic than tying around the back of your head. The other thing I would say is I'm using pipe cleaners, and instead of making a particular channel, when I'm turning it inside out, because you have to flip those inside out, I just stick the pipe cleaner up in the top, and as I'm sewing around the edge and doing the pleats and the filing, I'm just sewing. Now, this is just for folks who are using them for themselves at home, because you need to wash those out every day, and it's unlikely they're going to get tossed in laundry. They need to be hand washed every day. So if you're out and about, like I'm making deliveries for Downtown Evening Soup Kitchen, I'll wear it for the day, then I'll come home and I'll put it in hot water with soap and a little bit of bleach and air dry them. So I understand Meg's comment about the fact that those wires will rust if they're going through the Yale New Haven system over and over. But I think for personal use, the pipe cleaners are fine and they actually fit very well. The other thing I would say is I got almost all of my materials donated by the theater that I work for. I work for Iverton Playhouse. So if anybody is aware of a community theater or anyone else, because we're all shut down now, if you know someone in those areas, it might be worth reaching out and saying, do you have extra yardage or do you have extra notions that we can use? I know that's pretty much where I've gotten all my stuff. The pipe cleaners, I have about 500 of these if anybody wants them. I ordered them on Amazon. And then the other thing too, Kate, when you need help packing up the packages or making deliveries, I'm not working during the day. So if you need a driver, just let me know. Okay, that's it for me, guys. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so that's, I think, about, we got all of our questions. I really appreciate all of you coming together, learning and sharing your experience. Twist ties for plants would work. I've heard that. I've had questions about metal, plant wire. I'm not sure what kind of metal it is, but especially for the personal use, like Elizabeth was just talking about, that would be, I think definitely would be an option. I'm hoping that we're going to continue to have these calls on Wednesdays and Saturdays, so I'll be putting those up. I'm also, I want to make sure I've recorded this just for personal notes, but I think a lot of great information came out of it. So I would love to be able to post this for other people. If anyone has any concerns about that, please reach out to me. You can reach me easily at info@makehaven.org if you have concerns about that going up on our YouTube channel. But I feel like there was so much great information that I learned from all of you. I would love to pass that along. So I think we'll close out, and I will thank you all and hope to see you Wednesday evening, and keep sewing.